Spain is a nation on the decline. The 19th century has so far been very rough for this country. The homeland was devastated in Napoleonic Wars, and to follow that up, their colonies in the Americas rose up and declared independence. With only Cuba and the Philippines, Spain had barely any colonial revenue. The government was also very unstable, with competing ideologies over who should lead the nation. And now, in 1836, we see this shell of an empire with a bad military, bad economy, and unstable government. Now fortunately, Victoria III does not betray the fact that Spain was in a civil war at this point in its history. This country now has a lot of opportunities to expand and rebuild their dead empire. The first step to rebuild a colonial empire is more colonizing. So after I reform my government, I try to get the colonial exploitation law so I can take the unclaimed land and use the labor there for my benefit. The first targets I go after are around Indonesia, since the native nations there are really weak. But unfortunately, for some reason, people in this colonial empire are against more colonizing, leaving me with no choice but to use another method to exploit money from people. With our first piece of new real estate acquired, we can focus more on our money. Now, for some reason, people were pretty hesitant for this new tax law to pass, but I managed to convince them it was worth it since I'm mainly taxing poor people. And now, with the budget balanced, I could now refocus from exploiting poor people to exploiting Africans. That's why I went for Madagascar. It's a very valuable state with a big population and a huge choice of resources to use for your market, along with a rubber spawn later in the game. Now, despite the tech advantage, we almost embarrassed ourselves by almost failing the invasion into the Morena Kingdom, but I saved the battle by combining our fleets under one admiral. And now, with the harsh naval support penalty gone, the Spanish army is able to land and use its full combat power, and the Morenan army stands no chance against us. Later on, the Morenans capitulate to me, and I can make use of their people to continue my industrial drive. And now, since I'd proven myself so good at exploiting people to push up my GDP, I was formally led back into the Great Power Club. As a formal big boy, I had to start making big boy plays, and that started with annexing the Philippines, since subjects in the game are pretty pointless, because you can't build on them, and you can't even use their full potential. But then, to my horror, I discovered Portugal was going to join against me to stop me from trying to make my game better. Now clearly, somebody had to step in to make decisions for Portugal because they aren't making the right ones. So I tried to puppet them. But unfortunately, the Philippines gave in, so I had to wait for another time to puppet Portugal. After the truce ran out, I started the diplomatic play to puppet Portugal, but unfortunately made the mistake of upgrading my army right before the war. The debuff made my armies way worse than the Portuguese, but through superior numbers, we were able to overwhelm them. Now, although the Prussians did join the war, they knew the Portuguese were better off under Spanish rule, so they didn't offer any support to their front. And so the Portuguese capitulated to me and accepted their new management. Sadly, we live in a society where if one nation does too good, people will try to tear it down. With Russia and Italy joining together to cancel me on the global stage. But their heart wasn't in it. All that happened was Italy attempting to do one naval invasion and failing horribly. After that, we just stared at each other until we white-pieced. After this war, we were able to immediately use our influence over Portugal to form Iberia. It was a great moment that was immediately undermined by the god-awful flag they made for this horrible country. But, unfortunately for the world, they're going to see a lot more of this flag, as I still had plans to conquer a lot more land, especially using the newly acquired Portuguese colonies, since they gave us a lot more potential for growth. The economy soon started booming, with us getting a decent surplus and becoming the third greatest power in the world. With Portugal integrated, we had a massive boost to our GDP, and I wanted to keep the economy growing. So soon I worked to pass laissez-faire, which is really strong as a great power to keep this boom going. Now, I had focused my sights on more of Latin America. I already taken Panama, and a peaceful negotiation with Colombia, but I needed more from this region. Key target is Venezuela since they spawn oil, and the AI does not build enough oil for the world, so I have to do it myself. This time though, it will be much more difficult because America is intervening. They mentioned something called, like, the Monroe Doctrine, which I've never heard of before, but it's just proven that Americans really are the ultimate buzzkill. When the war started, the Iberian military proved itself by brushing aside the pathetic Latin American militaries. America showed how little they cared for their so-called Monroe Doctrine and didn't even bother sending troops to Colombia. So while the Iberian army was collecting wins in Colombia and eventually Venezuela, the Iberian Armada prepared for its greatest win in this game. Off the East Coast, they engaged the American fleet and defeated it without losing a single ship. The defeat of the American Navy had been so devastating that it even caused a recession in the American economy due to the Spanish blockade of American ports. Despite Iberia asserting its dominance on the world stage, certain people thought that life is not that good under Iberian rule. At first, it was the Filipinos who, despite all the investment and jobs I brought to their land, to purely benefit myself, of course, they wanted independence from me. Like, they may claim they're fighting for freedom, equality, and end colonial exploitation, but I don't care. I want arguments from them. I want money. But while I'm putting the boot down in the Philippines, people in the Caribbean just start saying the same thing. You know what's the best part? I like how it's even called the Haitian Uprising, even though I never took over Haiti. With the empire stable, I go to war with the Dutch again because there's a state in East Borneo that also produces oil, and I want there to be actual oil in the world, so it's up to me to take the hard burden of being the only oil producing nation in the world and making all that money from that industry. Now, fortunately, the Dutch armies are not as advanced as the battle-hardened Iberians, so we can sweep through them, winning battle after battle. But then, I noticed something. After seeing a naval victory, I noticed that I had a very seasoned admiral. And yes, this man is 95 years old, and I had hired him at the beginning of the game, and he is still fighting for us. Now, with that type of commitment in our military, the Dutch had no chance, and they soon capitulated afterwards, giving us more of the precious resources they had in their East Indies. Now, while all this was going on, I was doing an experiment in Panama to make sure I would never have another Afro-Caribbean uprising again in that state. So, I prioritized immigration there so that the people who move there can overpower any political movement from that region to separate from me. And, as you can see, it worked like a charm. At the turn of the 20th century, I decided it was time for the biggest play of the game. I wanted that billion-dollar economy, so I went for the biggest prize of all in the world, India. Now, fortunately, the colonial troops in India were no problem for the Iberian army, as we slowly but surely pushed from our original base in Goa to sweep through the subcontinent. Now, the British army desperately tried to push from Gibraltar and advance to Madrid to force a peace in this war, but the advance stagnated due to insufficient supplies. The Iberian Armada had effectively cut off supplies to this British army, and the Royal Navy was helpless to stop the convoy raiding. After humiliating the British in Gibraltar, the Iberian military considered a naval invasion to the UK itself, but the British government had accepted that they could not win this war and surrendered the crown jewel of their empire to Iberia. With India gone, the UK fell into a deep recession that would take many years to recover from, with British investors leaving the market now understanding that the Iberian market was the best place to make money. The economy was soaring in Iberia, which now, in the span of 70 years, firmly solidified as the #1 great power in the world and to be the great hegemon of the 20th century as they reached a $1 billion GDP. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you for watching. I'm going to try to get more videos like this out, hoping for at least like once a week. So subscribe if you want to see more of this. Also, I stream on Twitch, so if you want to see me live, you can follow me there as well. I linked it in the description. And that's it. Goodbye, y'all.